Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's alltasksIT panel discussion on data loss prevention, powered by the amazing team at alltasksIT, Veeam and Marsh. First and foremost, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders both past and present. My name is Matt Zarnock, and it's a complete privilege to be your MC as we meet to explore how to keep it simple with some of the essential 8 controls and unpack why data loss prevention is relevant for everyone here today and in general. In terms of housekeeping, guys, there's a few things I'd like to mention. We are planning to keep this session a little bit interactive, so we're looking to get some interaction with you guys and obviously some feedback. And we're planning to do that with a number of poll questions that we want to give out to you guys, and I'll give you a heads up as to when they're coming. And we're looking for responses from you guys. If you can give us those, that'd be fantastic, and I'll let you know as they come. If you do have any questions or comments or anything like that, feel free to use the Q&A feature that's available to you in Teams now. I'm not sure if you can all see it, but in the top of the screen there, you should see a little Q&A option. And that just gives us an opportunity for you guys to ask questions and for us obviously to see them and understand them before we start responding to those. I will keep everybody's microphones muted during this session. And obviously I'm happy to open that up for a very special person at the end if they are prepared to belt out the Pet Shop Boys, "What have I done to deserve this?" Feel free to turn your webcams on or off. It's not mandatory to do so. It's just nice sometimes when people are asking questions or they have something that they've asked. It's nice to put a face to the name, obviously, as I see those questions coming in. And finally, to confirm to everyone here, this webinar is being recorded for those that couldn't get to this session, so they can review it at a later time. So thank you again, everybody, for your attendance today, and let's get underway. First off, it's a real privilege to welcome our special guests for today's session. Samuel Rogers, who is the Managing Principal of Cyber at Marsh. G'day, Samuel. And Andreas Koutras, who is the Systems Engineering Team Lead at Veeam. G'day, Andreas. Samuel and Andreas, welcome once again. Thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate the time, and we're all sort of time poor every now and then, but it's great to see you guys here. And of course, there is me, your super host with the most and special guest in his own right, Matt Zarnock for alltasksIT. So to get underway, let's get you guys just thinking for just a little moment, right? And I'm going to sort of play something in your heads, and hopefully there's a little bit going through your minds. So let's get ready. Thinking in terms of today, just spend about 30 seconds or so contemplating where you are at on your journey of implementing DLP. Now, some have heard of DLP, some have not heard of DLP, but if you have heard of DLP, just spend a little, just a brief moment going, where am I at with DLP today? Because it is an interesting topic, and it does form part of a bigger cybersecurity approach long term. So some of the questions that would be running through my head, and I'm sure that some of you are thinking the same way, but what is DLP, right? I've never heard of this before. What does it mean? Should I be worried about it? What does data loss prevention actually mean to someone? How does data loss prevention work? What am I trying to stop? What am I trying to not stop? And the other thing that I want you to think about, obviously, is for 30 seconds or so, how do I know what I'm actually losing, or should I know what I'm losing? If I'm going to lose data, do I care that I'm going to lose data, or should I not worry about that data because it just doesn't seem relevant? So if you've had to think about that and you've spent sort of 30 seconds just asking yourself those questions internally, I will kick into an introduction of myself, and then obviously talk a little bit about why I feel data loss prevention is important for any organization. So first and foremost, my name is Matt Zarnock, and I am the CTO at alltasksIT. I've been working in IT for almost 20 years and have had the opportunity to work across a range of different industries, from food manufacturing, transport, logistics, construction, and of course, MSPs. Working in multiple industries also meant that my role varied from utilizing different IT skills and knowledge to either complement existing business practices, or more importantly, build out an IT strategy and framework to support an organization's 3 key elements, being their people, process, and technology. Interestingly though, the last 6 years of my IT career as an IT professional has been centered around discussing and consulting with organizations about something called cybersecurity. And from this, I started to delve deeper into the world of cyber and IT security policies and controls and what this actually means to a business or an individual. So a large portion of my role here at alltasksIT, guys, is actually acting as our virtual CISO or CISO, if you will, with my key focus being on data protection, compliance, and of course, determining the types of controls that are needed to reduce cyber risk to business where applicable. The controls that I implement for all tasks in particular are always aligned with the information security management framework, such as ISO 27001 and 2, and obviously the ACSC's Essential 8. So those that have heard of the ACSC, this is how you start a journey. This is how you start that beginning of cybersecurity. What does it mean? So today's topic obviously is data loss prevention, or DLP as we know it. Now, why is this important for organizations? The harsh truth about DLP is that no company is immune to data loss. It was estimated that a business of any size will fall victim to a cyber attack every 11 seconds. And this was in 2021. And that number is expected to get worse this year. But the good thing is our awareness in the industry is increasing. So we're hoping to reverse that and take it another way. Now, keep in mind, external threats here are not the only cause for concern. In 2021, Verizon wrote a report called Data Breach Investigations. Now, this report revealed that more than 20% of security incidents and breaches in your organization actually involved insiders in your business or insiders of a business. So data loss, guys, can actually occur in your own backyard. And it's from the people that you trust and respect. But that's the reality of data loss. Data loss of any scale can impact the financial health of your business or a business. In 2021, the technology leaders, IBM, and we all know IBM, released a cost of data breach report. And that report indicated that the global average data breach cost to a business rose from 3.86 million to 4.24 million in 2021. Just 1 year, you can see how much it has increased because this is costing business money. Apart from financial losses, data loss results in the loss of productivity, revenue, clients. It can damage your company's reputation, your brand, your consumers' confidence. There can be long-term negative impacts due to data loss. A data loss prevention strategy, or DLP as it's known, is vital to secure your data, protect your intellectual property, and stay compliant with regulations. DLP systems and policies will ensure that your company's confidential or classified data is not lost, mishandled, or accessed by unauthorized users. Now, there are 3 types of data loss prevention that I want to talk about. And I'll go into them. I won't go too deep, but I'll go deep enough that it will give you guys the awareness. So the first level or the first type of data loss prevention is actually what they call the network DLP. Network DLP solutions provide greater visibility into your company's network, thereby allowing you to monitor and control the flow of information via that company network, the email or the web. DLP solutions applied at this level help you analyze network traffic and establish security policies to mitigate data loss risks while ensuring that you remain compliant with regulation. By enforcing security policies, DLP can perform certain preset actions or runbooks, if you will, such as allowing, blocking, flagging, auditing, encrypting, or even quarantining activities that look suspicious and that violate your company's information security policy. Then we have the endpoint DLP. So I'm not sure if people have heard of this before, but endpoint devices, such as desktops and laptops, are the primary tools of today's modern business. Endpoint DLP solutions monitor endpoint devices, such as servers, computers, laptops, mobile phones, mobile devices on which your company's critical information is either used, moved, or stored. And if you think about today's world, who can't access something from the company that they work for on the device that they're using? It's just so common. But endpoint DLP helps prevent your sensitive data or your organization's sensitive data from being lost or being misused by individuals. And then we get into the last level, which is cloud DLP. And with companies increasingly moving their businesses and their platforms and applications to a cloud-based environment, cloud DLP is vital to ensure business-critical workloads are not leaked, lost, or mishandled. Cloud DLP solutions protects your data in the cloud by encrypting sensitive data and ensuring that the data is sent to only those cloud apps that are authorized by your company. Today's advanced cloud DLP technologies are capable of identifying, classifying, removing, or modifying confidential data before it is shared to a cloud environment to protect your data from cyber threats, malicious insiders, and accidental exposure. So guys, to summarize, data loss prevention policies on any of the three types that I just mentioned can be used to secure and ensure data is not leaked or leaving your business without your knowledge. That's my part. That's kind of where I wanted to take you guys and create that awareness. So I hope that that's given you a little bit of an understanding of what DLP is. And hopefully it gives you guys something to think about certainly from the level that I have to work with and deal with, right? It's real, it's a reality. And we need to think about it in a different way, not just, I've heard about it, but I don't know what it means. Now you have an understanding of what DLP actually means and what it can do. Andreas, Samuel, I'm starting to lose my voice by the sounds of it, but thank you again to both of you for joining us today. I will cut over to you guys now, and certainly, what a time to be in the world of data recovery. As you guys know, we've seen some big organizations in the news talking about data loss and whatnot, and without getting into them, I think everybody in the room kind of knows what's going on. But Andreas, we'd love to hear a little bit about your role, certainly about the Veeam team, and how your clients are making life easier on their journeys towards implementation of a DLP strategy using what is available to them in the industry right now. Thank you, Andreas.
Thanks, Matt. So as a systems engineering team lead across New South Wales, I manage a bunch of gentlemen, and so we speak with customers all the time. And second to that, I'm also a solution architect across all of the Pacific Islands and Australia and New Zealand. So we constantly have different types of customers who are exposed to different types of risks. And you mentioned one thing there in your opening there, Matt, which was around people, process, and technology. And when we start talking about the Essential 8 process, really the people, the process, and technology are the three parts you need to focus on to ensure that as you're actually building the strategy that utilizes the Essential 8 framework, you're taking each one of those into consideration as you're actually building your strategy to protect you and your business against losing data. And so when we have these discussions, you threw out some figures there, and so I quickly whipped out and had a look and looked at some of the recent surveys that we've done. And so last year we interviewed about 3,000 businesses globally, just randomly picked them, and we asked some very simple questions. What kind of gap in your protection do you have today? And so there were some very specific questions that were asked, and what was found out of that was 89% of those companies out of the 3,000 had some sort of gap in their data protection. So they were open for data loss. And then out of those 3,000 businesses, 76%, 2/3 of them, or sorry, no, 75%, so yeah, 3/4 of them had suffered at least one type of ransomware attack in the previous 12 months, which is astounding. What's even more astounding, which is why this is becoming more and more of a problem, is that 36% of them paid to get the data back. And then out of those 36%, only 20% of them couldn't actually get their data back, even though they paid the ransom. And the one figure that we haven't yet started to ask the question about, and the discussions I've had with customers, and one that I think we need to think about is, for those that have paid, a large number of them have reported they have been re-attacked, re-ransomwared, and held to and forced to pay. And so it leads to the cycle, and so you have to be able to break that cycle. And with the correct frameworks, the correct processes, educating people, using the right technology, you're able to break that cycle. And that's going to be critical as people go about building a framework around data loss prevention. And as you mentioned there, the three types, whether it was cloud, whether it was server-based, whether it was edge protection, data lives all over the place, and it's ubiquitous in its nature, right? Because we all consume data from various different access points, whether it's through the systems that we do our work with. More and more businesses are now consuming software as a service, and people are now only just starting to realize how at risk that data is. Because when you read the service level agreements around some of those, they're realizing the gap in that space. And so there's that whole idea that, yes, technology will provide one part of our future, but you really have to understand the other parts of that people and process part to ensure that, one, you have a secure and rugged framework, and then more importantly, that you're going through the correct operational processes to make sure that that data and access to that data is secured. So that's what we're seeing right now at the moment. Back to you, Matt.
Thank you, Andreas. That's great. And look, it does sound to me, very much like Veeam are already applying real-world controls to obviously strengthen and enforce either new or existing DLP strategies. So, in my opinion, I mean, this is obviously a game changer for sure in the fight against protecting data at any level, which is great. Thank you very much, Andreas. Appreciate that. And look, of course, guys, not everything is going to be technical when it comes to data protection and the impact that lost data can have on your business. I would now like to pass over to Samuel. Samuel, tell us a little bit about how DLP relates to cyber insurance.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. And thanks to everybody for attending today. Just a brief introduction for myself. My name's Sam Rogers. I'm a managing principal in Marsh Australia's cyber insurance practice. So Marsh as an organisation is I think the world's largest insurance broker. So our role is to secure insurance solutions for our clients across basically all ranges of insurance, and we provide additional advisory services as well. So we're a broker, we're not an insurer. But what we do is we deal with all the major carriers in Australia that do provide insurance for our clients. And we have a really strong market position in understanding what the market is doing around cyber insurance. And also we have a quite substantial claims experience to draw on and the learnings that we can get from that. So Marsh has a cyber insurance practice in Australia. I think at the moment we're 7 people strong. And we sit across the entirety of our portfolio of clients. So we service everything from the very small organizations, 1 to 2 person SMEs, right up to ASX 100 organizations, public sector, global organizations as well. So we've got a very, very wide range of experience when it comes to cyber risk for lots of different kinds of organizations. When it comes to data loss and data loss prevention, in particular for cyber, there are really 2 components that we're talking about from a cyber insurance perspective, at least. The first and most important is understanding what coverage is available to an organization following a data loss event. And we've had a large number of claims over the last several years that have involved some form of data loss, whether that's a strict data breach, as we've seen recently reported in the press, or especially the last couple of years, a ransomware event, which can involve data loss itself, but often just involves encryption of systems and things shutting down. Now, it's important to understand as well the way in which traditional forms of insurance may cover those forms of loss, and what you'll likely find is that more traditional forms of insurance don't cover those forms of loss. So if there isn't a standalone cyber insurance policy in place, you may find that there's not there isn't coverage available for you under your more standard business insurances. But from going to Andreas's point around recent statistics that he's seen, I've just pulled up our most recent claim stats. So in the last 6 months of 2021, we saw a breakdown of losses based on both data breaches and ransomware. Data breaches formed 21% of cyber insurance losses that we saw at Marsh, and ransomware formed 19%. So altogether, just under half. But we also saw a whole lot of incidents involving network interruption and non-malicious activity involving system shutdown, those kinds of things. So that's the first component, just around what coverage is available within the market, how does it respond to a data loss event, and I can probably go into that a little bit later. The other component that we're increasingly dealing with, especially for larger organizations, is understanding what protections you have in place through individuals like Andreas and through Matthew around your data loss prevention capabilities, what kind of services and tools that you have in place. Because what insurers are now looking for is an understanding of how an organization is managing this kind of risk before they will look to offer coverage. And from my perspective, the largest challenge that I've had as a broker for working for my clients over the last 2 years has actually been securing this coverage going forward, because the market has retracted substantially in the wake of what we saw in the last 2 years, and Andreas would be across this substantial uptick in ransomware related losses. That's had a flow-on effect in terms of paid losses within the insurance industry, and the whole market has effectively retracted. So it's become much more challenging over the last 2 years to secure cyber insurance, and the level of detail that insurers are now requiring around specific technical tool sets and the capability to monitor for data loss and respond to data loss has become much more substantial than it ever was in the past. So you may actually find, if you're an organization going into the market for the first time, that in absence of some form of data loss prevention solution, you may really struggle to secure cyber insurance going forward, or your premium may be quite substantially higher than you would otherwise expect. So that kind of gives some background as to where my role sits in this. I'm not a technologist, I'm an insurance broker, and I have a legal background. So it's interesting, Matthew, what you provided before around a breakdown of the different DLP solutions. I learned a bit there as well, so thank you for that. And I'll jump in later in the conversation to kind of give an understanding of how the insurance, how cyber insurance plays into the topic today around data loss prevention.
Great, thank you very much, Samuel. And yeah, even for me, that was an eye opener too, right? The fact that data loss is a very real thing, and the fact that there are now insurances around it, and as you both, Andreas and yourself, have seen, there's been a massive uptake in in obviously phishing campaigns. Phishing data loss is going out. People are losing information when they didn't know they were losing it, and it just, again, it's that awareness, right? Not knowing what you've lost. Versus finding out I've lost this and now I'm being held to ransom to have it back, and not all cases you will get it back. So yeah, very interesting, mate. Very interesting. Thank you. All right, I think it's time. Let's get a little bit interactive. Why not? It's exciting at the moment. Let's go with a poll question if we can. Shane, as the master of poll questions, let's get a poll question out there. How worried are you about a data loss event happening at your business? Let's get a couple of responses in here if we can. I'd love to see the responses. Let me have a quick look. Very worried. So the trend that I'm seeing is very worried, which is it is good to see that people are worried about this. It shows that there are, again, the awareness is there, right? The people are starting to understand this, and this comes back to what I mentioned earlier about the 11 seconds, every 11 seconds, somebody is losing data, and it's costing millions of dollars. So yeah, it's great to see that people are very worried about it. Think about some of the things that drove your decision regarding that poll question. Keep in mind too, guys, data loss could be as simple as a lost laptop, right? A lost laptop, that's data loss, right? You've lost a laptop. Or a laptop has a ransomware attack or a ransomware lock on it. So your data's sitting there, but you cannot use it, right? Because it's locked. Think about some of those drivers behind your decision. What's made you very worried about it? There must be things that are driving you to be worried about it. And then we can start to talk about some of those key preparation activities that that can occur. And again, I started talking about DLP, right? They're just little things that you can do to make a difference. And then again, thinking 6 to 12 months down the track, guys, you know, where would you like to be in terms of readiness? If you're very worried today, had you thought about this, or had it been part of your, I guess, your business process and practices that you have a DLP strategy in there or a policy, perhaps that answer wouldn't have been very worried. It might have just been worried, or it might have been on your list. You know, if you'd like to do more, what's holding you back? You know, if you're very worried, what's stopping you from doing something about it? You know, let's have the conversation. And then if you are doing things about it, if it's on your list, or if you're not worried about it, are you happy with the level of testing, or what I call playbooks that you can run through after a disaster has happened, right? So if you've lost data, what does the playbook look like? Do you have a playbook? How do we respond? What are we doing about it, right? We lost it. Okay, don't worry about it. We lost it. That's not where you want to be. And obviously, when you are testing these sort of things, what are lessons that you take away from it? These are the questions I would ask you as a consultant, or as a, you know, as a person who considers data loss, you know, quite a big play in today's world. So thank you guys for your responses on that. Shane, if you could do me a favor, I like the momentum on this. I'd like to ask another poll question if I could, just to get the gauge again. I have another one lined up. I think it's, here we go. It's come up. Okay, so this one's interesting. How prepared are you for a data loss event? Now, this is really interesting, because I always see mixed results with this one. Some people just, you know, what's a data loss event? You know, the guy lost his laptop and another guy handed it in. That's fine. How do you know that the guy who handed it in hasn't already taken what he wanted? So here we go. A what? I like it. A what? So a data loss event. Here we go. So there's an example, right? There's an example I just gave you of a scenario where, you know, one of your employees has gone to the airport, about to catch a flight, left their mobile phone on the table in the Qantas lounge or the Virgin. I'm not affiliated with any of them, by the way, but left it on the lounge, walked out, got the flight, and didn't have a lock. Just didn't have a lock on that phone for whatever reason. No lock. Somebody's come by, picked it up, bang, can scroll through the emails, can see information that nobody should be seeing unless it was that individual. That is a typical situation of a data loss event. Data has been lost, whether it's been exfiltrated, whether it's been, you know, copied, it doesn't matter. Data has been lost. Somebody has seen that shouldn't have seen that. So thank you, guys. Thank you very much for that one. I appreciate it. And again, if you're not prepared, why not? You know, would you prefer that it happens to you first and then assess that damage after it and then decide, do you need it? You know, do you have users that you feel you need to educate daily with little hints and tips that they can apply anywhere, anytime, and not just at a business level, but even at a personal level? Because you got to remember, you're a representative, your employees are representatives of your business outside of your business as well. So just because they're in the office doesn't mean they're still not carrying your data around. And obviously, you know, sometimes staff's personal lifestyle may open up that door in your organization. And if it opens up that door, how do we stop this and how do we understand this better? What else can we do to stop? We know we can't deal with people's lifestyles and personal lifestyles, but what can we do to aid the risk or minimize risk to our business because they have a lifestyle, right? And it's a common question. It's asked all the time. Andreas, I would like to hand over to you, if I may, and let you run a small piece. I think you've got some questions and whatnot, so I'm going to hand over to you if that's okay.
Sure, thanks, Matt. Hey, actually, I've got a bit of a poll as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit around software as a service, and I think we've got a poll that we can throw up, because it should be quite interesting to see what people say about that particular poll. So if you're using a software provider or software as a service provider, what would you do, or what would happen, or how would you recover that data in the event of a data loss? And it'll be interesting to see how people answer this, because a lot of people aren't really aware of some of the services that they are getting as part of the delivery of a software as a service. Good example of that will, you know, Office 365, could be Salesforce, it could be ServiceNow. There are many different types of software as a service they could be consuming, and understanding how their data is protected, retained, and what happens during a data loss event in those situations would be quite interesting. So just gonna have a little look here, see what results we've got in that space. Good to see at least someone's using an external backup. My software as a service provider will recover my data. At least someone's honest that they're not sure. That's a good one, because that's probably where most people are. If you do think your software as a service provider is providing backup, guess again, they're not. They provide data resiliency, they don't provide data protection. So all of your customer information that you store within Salesforce, for example, Salesforce don't back that up. It's retained in multiple locations. They give you resiliency, but guess what? If you delete a bunch of records, chances are it's gone. You're not going to be able to get that back, not unless you've actually got some way of bringing it back yourself. Alternatively, Office 365, they utilize things like legal hold to provide the ability to recover data in the back end. Legal hold isn't actually a protection mechanism, it's a legality requirement. So if you're getting reviewed or you're having legal compliance requirements thrust upon you, that's when you use legal hold. Legal hold's not a data protection mechanism. In fact, I can put people in touch with a specific customer who had the worst luck ever with that particular platform. They had a specific issue where they were trying to recover some data out of their legal hold environment. They were talking to Microsoft on the Microsoft support line. They were trying to get access to the data. Microsoft gave them the scripts, told them the switches. And so he read out exactly what the Microsoft engineer had read out, confirmed it, hit enter, and it deleted everything. They used an organization switch for the wrong command, at which case he went, well, what's my fallback here? You know, I've everything in that organization's gone. He was met with a dead ringtone. The actual support person hung up on him, and he had to relog call back with Microsoft. And while there was actually a mechanism for them to recover some of their data, they did have a data loss event because Microsoft say there are only certain types of data that they recover, and that requires a rollback in their environment. So they lost a couple of days of data, which is a late data loss prevention. So when you are buying services from a service provider, make sure you understand who looks after that data. What is your service level agreements actually allowing you to recover from? And what is the potential for that loss of data if you have to rely on their tools? In fact, if you read Microsoft Services Agreement, in there they actually tell you to use an external tool to protect your data. A lot of people don't really realize that. And so a lot of people need to, and potentially not everyone on this call, and it goes beyond this, but need to understand that it goes beyond just what you think you're getting from a service, and you've really got to dig into the terms and conditions. I'm sure Sam's used to having to dig into terms and conditions, both from a historic perspective and even today when you're taking out insurance. The T's and C's can mean everything between assisting you in a process or not. And you know, he was making mention there that your premiums could be high, you might not be able to get your cybersecurity insurance. Part of those things are things like the prerequisites, right? Have you got immutable data sets? Are you keeping multiple copies? Have you got the right locks and mechanisms in place? What types of data protection are you applying across your data? And that goes beyond just what is inside your data center. As Matt said, you know, that lives in the cloud, that lives on laptops, that lives in servers. It's everywhere because data is so ubiquitous. And a lot of people really have to think about that, especially in the next 12 months. So while we see ransomware prevalent today across lots and lots of internal systems, 12 months ago, we started seeing incidents where customers were getting compromised in the office space, in the M365 attack vector through OneDrive for Business. And that's because people didn't really realize that, you know, if you do compromise an endpoint, it starts to compromise everything that endpoint is connected to. And so in the next 12 months, what are we going to see? Are we going to see where the endpoints are compromised, and then they start to get access through screen loggers, key loggers, access to Salesforce? And then what other levels of access are they going to have, and how are they going to corrupt and remove your data or extract your data? And so having mechanisms to be able to recover, protect yourself is going to be critical in the next 12 months.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, Andreas. That's excellent. Sorry, I didn't know if you were done.
No, oh, I'm done. Thank you. Yep.
No, thank you, thank you. And again, a great poll question, a fantastic poll question. I actually thought you know, there were some mixed results in there too, but I think you pretty much nailed it, right? It's not always what you think you understand or what you think you see in terms of, you know, data protection or where is my data sitting, or if anything, is it even being backed up? You know, it's not as simple as that. And yeah, never rely on the service provider to be backing it up, because, you know, they can wash their hands of it quite quickly too, right, when it comes to that sort of stuff. So thank you very much. Always have some sort of data protection, and that includes backups. I'm actually gonna open the floor to just both yourself and Samuel. And I think there was one more poll question I think we had. Is that correct, Shane? Can we get that poll question out just for one more little bit of interaction? Here we go. Now, this, thank you, Andreas. This circles back to your conversation around backups and the points that you made. So, guys, if you could, please, how often do you verify your backups? Assuming that everybody on this call is taking backups of some sort or another, however you're taking them, how often do you actually verify those backups? And I could pick one that would just skew the numbers, I'm sure, but you know, I will say when we need them. How about that? I'll go the worst guy in the room when we need them.
To be honest, that is the most common time people verify their backups, right?
Absolutely.
And so being across all of Asia Pac in my role, I talked to various different companies, and there was one particular company we were talking to in Japan, and they did the when we need them methodology for data testing and verification. And so they had a data loss event, and this was about 18 months ago, actually just before COVID. And so they tried to recover a segment of data from tape, and they found that all of the data on the tape was unrecoverable. It's a common thing. Tape media can be susceptible for many different things, and age and time, sometimes they fail. So they went back a whole generation and went, okay, we'll go to the previous day, got that in, same problem. Another day, same problem. Another day, same problem. And they said, okay, there's something really, really wrong here. So they said, okay, let's go back to a yearly. Let's just skip a few things. Let's see a good yearly and see if we can work our way forward from there. So they went back to the yearly, same problem, corrupted. And they said, okay, is all the data on our disk outside of what we've got on tape okay? They checked that. Yes, the data is good. They said, okay, let's go to a random monthly. Came back, data is corrupted. And so this went on for about 3 or 4 weeks, where they got into a cycle of we're not really sure what's going on, we don't understand. And so with the partner that we were working with in that instance, we said, well, I think probably what we need to do is work on a time and motion study, see exactly what's going on from inception through to storage, and then from retrieval back to recovery. And so we did a big map, and we asked them what they did, and so they said, yep, data goes to disk, it gets written off to tape gets put into a tape box, and said, yep, and tape box is then put to a side to be shipped to our offsite. And they said, okay, so how is it shipped? Shipping goes into a courier box. The courier box then goes out of the building. I said, okay, so what happens with the courier box when it leaves your building? Don't know. That's the courier's job, not our job. Okay, let's go and talk to the courier. So they talked to the courier. The courier said, we take the box, we jump on the train, and we go from point A to point B. And I said, okay, point A to point B. And that was okay. And they said, then we store it and wait for retrieval. I said, okay, so we did that and pulled the data back. That exact same data, corrupted. So that's really weird. And so we did a bit more investigation, and I was talking to one of the Japanese guys, and it's quite hard when they're talking through some of the language barriers. And he was a bit of an engineering guy, and he was saying that they were doing some work on one of the trains and saying about some of the magnetic level maglev type trains that they have there, which triggered so maglev is magnetic, right? And he said, yes. And he said, so does the courier go on a normal train or a maglev train? And he goes, well, they're like 180 Ks away, so I'm guessing it's on a maglev. And so this tape was going on a maglev train right above huge magnets, which was just basically zeroing those tapes. And so they were backing up and they were doing all the right things. And because of this one little physical element outside of their control, none of their backups were ever recoverable from the tape location. And so there's some very interesting things that you should be doing, right? If they'd picked this up earlier, they wouldn't have 5 years worth of tapes that were dead. They brought them all back, and then right now we have to figure out how we're actually going to do this without compromise, and they ended up with a lead box effectively because it was the only way they could get it there, or lead line to stop the magnetic pulses interfering with it. So there's a bunch of things that people should do to ensure that their backups are good, and part of that is verification process. We call it data assurance inside Veeam, and we do that at every kind of level. And so when you are writing the backup for the first time, you should not only verify it from a CRC perspective, but you should boot that virtual machine directly out of the backup volume. And that's what we call sure backup. And the reason it's called sure backup because you're sure that that backup is good. And you get a big tick, it's green, the virtual machine or physical machine boots up in the virtual environment. Yes, it's all good. Shut it down. Yep, that backup is 100% good. When you replicate it somewhere, you can do the same. If you move it to tape, you can recover it and actually automate the recovery to do the test somewhere else. There's all these processes that people should be utilizing. Not only that, using tools like data immutability. Data immutability enables you to have locations where you put data and that data will not be able to be changed. And there's many different types and forms, right? There's disk-based, there's object-based. Tape used to be immutable until you put it over a magnet, and then suddenly it's not. Or worse yet, in the old sticky fingers or actually butterfingers. I certainly remember changing tapes in my engineering days and dropping tapes because you were carrying 3 of them across the room, and the likelihood of you being able to recover from that was quite low. So there's all these different things that people should be doing during that process. And so that when we need them mentality really does put you at risk. You really should be putting it into a process, being able to test them more regularly, whether that's monthly, and just randomizing some of that where it is available on disk and an immutable disk or mutable object storage, utilizing that ability to utilize and access that data more often when it's there. Sam, what about you?
Sorry, just coming off mute there. Andres, you just threw that to me with not a lot of expectations. So, yeah, that's an interesting point of coming. It's a really great story about that. Yeah, the tape backup on a maglev train. That's interesting. Look, from my perspective, I'm coming at this from an insurance angle. It's interesting you mentioned data immutability. That's a key issue that we're now looking to understand from a quite substantial number of our clients here, because a lot of the biggest concern here around data backups in particular is an understanding of, in the event of a ransomware event, what kind of access would a threat actor have to your environment and what kind of degree of damage could they potentially do? So if all they can access is a live operating environment and they've got no access to any kind of backups, especially if you've got immutable backups in place, then that's a significant level of protection that you've automatically got in place against a really substantial ransomware event. And the largest ransomware events that we see tend to be a situation where somebody's been in the environment for a quite substantial period of time. They've managed to work out all the interconnections, how the network is structured, how the backups operate, and they've come in and they're not only locked down the operating network, but they've also locked down all the backups or deleted all the backups. So effectively, the targeted organization really doesn't have a lot of options outside of negotiating with a threat actor. So just to tie in what you've said there, that kind of approach to backups of thinking kind of 2 steps ahead, making sure there is that level of process in place, that process is tested, is really, from our perspective as insurance brokers that specialize in this space, it is really becoming increasingly important to ensure that you've got best in class practices in place. What I might pivot to, though, is a quick discussion around some of the liabilities and costs that can come from these kind of events and how cyber insurance can assist in those circumstances. Going back to Andreas's point around SaaS platforms and outsourced services, I think one thing I really do want to stress is that it's really important to understand that outsourcing data to a third-party service provider does not outsource your liability for that data. So if you're collecting personally identifiable information on behalf of your customers, you can't hide behind the concept of saying, okay, we're collecting that information, but we're passing it on to a third-party service provider. We have no responsibility for it. That simply isn't the case. The liability attaches to the organization that's requested that information. And for an organization that is subject to the Privacy Act, which is basically any private organization with a revenue of $3 million or more, some of the circumstances that Matt has described previously around a phone being lost, or a spreadsheet being sent to the wrong individual that contains personal information, depending on the information that's included in that material, that could potentially result in a mandatory notification to the Information Commissioner and opening up the organisation to associated fines, penalties, and investigations. So that's another consideration there. From an insurance angle, there are a number of different things that are available to assist in that kind of data loss event. Cyber insurance is what we call a modular policy. It provides a combination of first-party coverage, so coverage for first-party expenses resulting from a cyber incident, as well as third-party liability, so liabilities that you incur in the event that effectively somebody sues you or there's a regulatory action brought against you following a major data incident. At a very high level, the way to break this down is basically incident response expenses going to the first party coverage. Incident response expenses effectively covers you for associated costs that you are not anticipating to deal with the event as it rolls out across the business. So engaging with specialist providers like Matt or like Andreas in the event of a significant incident to say, okay, what's happened here? Do we understand the extent of it? How do we ensure that we can, if it's a ransomware event, how do we stop the ransomware event? How do we make sure that the method of egress has been protected and there's no further ability for a threat actor to get access to our environment? On top of that, you have the legal component. So getting immediate legal advice to determine what your next steps need to be, getting access to support for crisis communications. So if you need to engage with a PR firm to manage the message externally, and also, one of the big issues that's happened out of one of the most recent data breaches is this idea of credit monitoring services. So if there is financial information that's been affected here, you may be required to provide credit monitoring services to affected customers, and ordinarily that's covered within the context of a cyber insurance policy as well. Leaving incident response to one side, you have coverage within a cyber insurance policy for data and system restoration costs, so the cost of actually restoring affected data, and whether that's via backups or in a lot of cases, if it's necessary to restore it manually. Cyber extortion, so the actual costs of paying a ransom in the event that that's necessary, can be insured as well. There's a legal element to that, which I won't go into, but that it comes down to whether or not it's legally insurable or not. And business interruption is the other major expense there. So if your network goes down, you can't continue to operate. Those costs, the loss of net profit and additional costs of working can be insurable under a cyber insurance policy. Third-party liability is the other major component. So if there's a privacy liability matter brought against you, so an allegation that you failed to protect somebody's privacy, then that's covered. That the defense costs and damages for that kind of loss are covered as well. Network security liability covers you for the costs of a claim in the event that there's an allegation that a failure to protect your network had a flow-on effect to a third-party network. So if somebody uses your systems to access one of your customer suppliers' systems. And then finally, a lot of cyber insurance policies cover media liability too. So defamation, claims alleging libel, slander, that kind of thing too. There are a whole lot of other additional coverage extensions which you can potentially look at. But I'm conscious of time here, and I know there was the idea of opening this up to questions, so I might just pause there and maybe hand back to Matt quickly, and we can open up the floor to questions.
Yeah, thank you, Samuel, and thank you, Andreas. Andreas, I love that story about the non-immutable tapes. That's fantastic. I don't think I'd heard a story like that either, so I agree with Sam. That was a top story. And definitely, look, Sam, thank you for the insight into cyber insurance. I guess a lot of people wouldn't have even considered immutable copies or immutable backups being something that that should be part of that conversation, right? When we talk about backups and data loss as well. So yeah, great insight from both of you. Thank you. Another poll question's come up just to keep it interactive and keep everyone on their toes. Do you understand how your insurances may or may not respond following a data loss event? So I'm guessing that some are going to not be sure here and some may understand it. I think what we were lucky enough to experience today with Sam being on the call is that, now the awareness is there, right? Now we're starting to understand how the insurances, can obviously play a part, or, how they respond in terms of data loss events. And again, to Andreas's point, right? It's the immutable backups, the immutable copies, things that cannot change. So if you've got something somewhere and it's not going to change, that's gold, right? Because no one can get to it, no one can change it, no one can touch it. We will very quickly, I will go to Q&A in 2 seconds. I've got one more question, if I could, for Andreas. Andreas, certainly a lot of information to digest, based on everything that we've all talked about here and discussed. And we've obviously been fortunate enough to hear how there is a different approach to cybersecurity and data loss, etc. Doesn't matter who we speak to, there's always a different approach. Where do you feel, Andreas, is a good place for our guests today to start or perhaps expedite their journey into DLP? And what do you feel are some of the simple gotchas that they should be aware of?
Look, the best place to start anybody's journey is with people that do this every day, right? So they should be working with their partners like yourselves. They should be working with people who deal with data protection like myself, around what their exposure is. So really doing an analysis, doing a maturity model assessment effectively, understanding people, processes, and technology, coming back to those 3 technologies again, mapping that back to the essential 8, and then really doing a gap analysis against where they are versus where they need to be, especially from their own maturity model, right? Because everybody's different. And so where you are in the journey, you may not have started versus others who are halfway down that road path. And so talking with specialists like ourselves and yourselves, we're able to help them in that journey. Gotchas that they need to be aware of: read the fine print, right? And really understand what it is you're getting. That's all I can really say on that.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Andreas. And Sam, any points you had on that, just regarding gotchas?
Yeah, so a couple of things to be aware of. Well, I mean, first of all, if you haven't had a conversation around cyber insurance, make sure you speak to your broker about it. It is probably the #1 hot topic within the insurance industry generally at the moment, along probably with ESG is another major issue that the insurance industry is dealing with. So, obviously make sure you've got an understanding. There's been a couple of poll questions around that have just popped up. So if you don't have an understanding of how you're currently covered for cyber risk, speak to your insurance broker in the first instance, or you can get in touch with Marsh. We're more than happy to assist in any queries around that as well. And once if you do have a cyber insurance policy, similar to what Andreas has said, the fine print is everything. So make sure that it's appropriate for your business and your business model. There are a number of different things that you can look at securing outside of kind of standardized coverage for cyber insurance. So you do want to make sure that it's going to respond to you appropriately. We always recommend a specialist approach for the purchasing of cyber insurance. And also, it's interesting, talking about cloud solutions as well. Make sure, especially if you're an organization that's reliant on software as a service and other cloud-based solutions, that your cyber insurance policy will respond to losses that affect those kind of solutions. Because we have seen some policies in the past, especially older policies, that are tied into losses affecting systems owned, operated, or leased by the insured. They may not necessarily respond to losses where the incident affects services provided to the insured by a cloud provider. So something else to consider there.
Excellent. Thank you, Sam and Andreas. Great feedback. Really appreciate it. I'll open it up now just quickly to Q&A. I know the microphones are still muted, but if you've got any questions, if just on a quick Q&A, we can go as long or as short as you guys like on this one. But jump into the Q&A section if you've got any questions. I can see there's one already in there from Jonathan. So thank you, Jonathan, for your question. And your question, obviously, we rely on alltasks to verify our backups. Is that like relying on a software for service provider? Now, I think everyone's going to probably look at me to say, Matt, can you answer this one? Because you're the CTO at alltasks. It's not a software for service provider, the backups that we look after for you. It's actually a backup as a service for you, Jonathan. So our responsibility to you as a managed services provider is to ensure that, number one, your data is being backed up. Number two, it is valid and verified and tested, that data can be restored at the drop of a hat or during any type of incident. And everything else relating to that backup, because we house it and because we have to maintain it for you, we make sure that it's protected. I hope that answers the question, Jonathan. I apologise if it doesn't, but and I don't have an option to type an answer in there. I can only ask questions, which is a bit silly. But anyway, anyone else got any questions in the Q&A section? Any questions for Andreas? Any questions for Sam regarding insurances? Andreas, from a Veeam perspective or a software perspective? Or if you'd like Andreas to give you another fantastic story about trains that go through magnets, I'm okay with that. I think the last one was great. No? Okay, that's fine. Thank you, everybody. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it. My name's Matt Zarnock, and on behalf of alltasks, Marsh and the team at Veeam, it has been an absolute privilege to moderate this conversation with you guys and have a great panel discussion. Thank you, Sam and Andreas, today for your time and your insight into what is fast becoming a challenging business conversation regarding cybersecurity and the impact it can have on business. Just from today's session, I hope you guys are all aware now that there are little steps that can be taken that can go a long way in protecting your organization's data. And sometimes it's not just about the fact that you lost the data, but it's also about how you lost that data and the simple controls that could have been implemented to protect that data. The team from alltasksIT will summarize the key points from today. We do have a recording of this session, of course, and we'll reconnect with you all to ensure that you can take away the best possible suite of information and knowledge for opportunity to help and ensure that you and your organization's data can, number one, evolve, number two, be secured, but number three, be able to go forward with less risk. Thank you, everybody. Have an amazing day. Thanks all for joining us, and I wish you all the very best. I believe there's a poll question or two at the end of this, so stick around, and if you could please answer those two poll questions, that'd be great. But thank you, guys. I really appreciate your attendance today and look forward to speaking to you all soon. Thank you so much.